But I got the new home theater amplifier, decided to build this, the most I've ever spent on 2 pieces of plywood before. So you can check the links for a video on the construction of this. I also built these speaker stands to go along with this. Built the speaker stands from all found material. So as I was scrounging around, we love finding material that's left laying around. I love recycling things that other people have left behind before they ever even make it to the dumpster. So I found some 1/2-inch plate and some 1.5-inch square tube. I recently got these Atmos speakers, so I decided to get these speakers off the floor. We had made some plywood boxes with material we found a couple of years ago, which worked fine for the time being, but it was time to get them at the proper level. So you can check out the build video for the speaker stands. But when we got the entertainment center done and the speaker center stands done, we decided it was time for something else, because we like to make things. That's what we do here on this channel. So I thought, in talking to my wife, we like this base plate, we like the same tower, so we could make a tower maybe that would come up 5 or 6 feet high and stack some books. We've got lots of good books around here and there. So maybe we could make something that went over here that started to stack these books up. Maybe that was similar to this with a base plate and some plates in between here. So we've got some ideas rattling around in my head, so it's time to pull out the paper and get to work. Okay, so you saw the drawing of what I was going to make today. I love using, as I mentioned before, parts that I find. So I found all these parts. You can see in that picture what they look like. They're pretty rusty. I just spent a little time on the wire wheel cleaning all these things up. But when I pay nothing for stuff, I really like that. So I do need to get a file. Essentially that fits in there pretty nicely. So we got a good fit there to chase that, the diagram. This is fitting in down to the square tube really nicely, so I'll put that in there and weld that, and then I'll show a picture when I get to that step. I've got this bronze and nylon washer for the top. So for this bottom out against the plate, I'm gonna put this in here so this will spin freely while it's bearing on the end, or at least relieve some of the pressure, because this slips much easier than steel to steel. I found this piece, which is kind of a nice piece. I wanted 6 inches, but it's 5.5, which is close enough. Actually found these nuts. I did buy these nuts at the local hardware store. They're $4 a piece, so that'll be my cost for the project is $8.50. But threads on here really nicely. I need that to go in there. So the next step here that I've got to figure out, or that I'm going to work on, is I need to make this nut fit into the end of the square tube. I thought about putting it on the milling machine and milling some off the top. This really is not that precise of an operation, so that it is a little silly. So I could grind it down. I might take a bandsaw to it and then try to sand it flush a little bit. But basically you'll see the next step is where I have this nut sanded or ground down so it'll fit down in there, and then I can start to weld all the other pieces together. So that's the next step. So I'm going to clean up the ends of these. I have 2 files here. This is a nice flat, sharp metal file. This one has a round back on it, so it's perfect for getting into the ends of these pipes. We're not doing anything crazy here. What I'm trying to do is just get the burrs out of the inside, so as it slides over my all thread, it doesn't mess up any of the threads, it doesn't catch on anything. It also makes it safer as I'm working on it around the shop. If that's smooth, there's no burrs in there, because when you cut this, it can get razor sharp. And so it just keeps it hand safe a little bit, but mainly it's to help the pieces slide back and forth easily. Now you'll see on some of this material, because this is folded around and welded, you'll actually see a little weld down inside here. Because we're putting a circle in here, this isn't a big deal for what we're working on, but if you were making a square tube slide into another square tube, you would have to completely file that welded seam down. It can be kind of a pain in the neck. Once we get those burrs filed out, I'm going to clean up a little bit more with the wire wheel just to get rid of any last little pieces, and then we're ready for the next step. So you can see I ended up having to get a much smaller file just for the correct radius in there. Something to pay attention to that's kind of interesting. Some of you may be wondering, if you have a vise, what these little jaws down here for. They actually are designed for holding pipe. So down there, you can hold your pipe in there, very still, super easy, and just come around inside it here with your file, clean that up. Okay. Carefully use your finger because you certainly don't want to cut yourself open, but real quick and easy way there to clamp a piece of pipe in there. You don't have to put much pressure on at all. Taking off all the big burrs with this file, ready to go. Now all these pieces are ready to go, and I'm just going to hit them with one more pass with the wire wheel to get all the little burrs off. So the tightening mechanism, as I showed in that drawing, is going to be just a hole through the shaft that you can put a screwdriver or a rod through and tighten this. So we need to get a hole through the shaft. It's hard to get a hole through the very center of anything that's threaded, hard to start the drill bit. So to actually just use this as a sacrificial nut. So I'm going to drill through the nut and everything. You can see I've center punched it right there. So as I start this, I'm just going to go ahead and drill straight down through the nut, starting with a small pilot hole. I'm going to keep plenty of oil in that hole so the bit doesn't overheat. I'm just going to take my time, work very slowly, go down through. After I get through the nut, it'll go down right through the center of that all thread. I'll open that up to a much larger hole. I'm just starting with a really small bit for a pilot hole to get this going. I'll change it out to a bigger bit. When I'm done, I'll have a nice clean hole right through the center of that shaft. That really would have been very hard to do without a nut like this. If you ever want to lock a nut onto a shaft and keep it from spinning, this is a great way to do that as well. You can drill through this here. You could get what's called a roll pin. That's a little piece of steel that's rolled into a cylinder. You can hammer that pin down into this hole. It'll hold the nut on the shaft. And then if you ever need to remove the nut for any reason, you can just drive it out with a straight punch and back that nut back off. So a great way to stop a nut. So I've gotten through with my bit now that's big enough. Just a couple things to note. I used two nuts. I backed these nuts against each other and I tightened them up really tight to keep that shaft from spinning while I was drilling it. Resist the temptation to put wire chips out of the way with your hands. It's a quick way to cut your hands up. Always use a dedicated brush like that to get your chips out of the way. And when you're using plenty of oil, what you'll see here are these curlicues that are coming off in long strips of metal, and there's no discoloration in the metal. So if you ever start to see a blue or purple thing or smoke coming off the drill bit, your drill bit's getting too hot. You're gonna ruin your drill bit. So make sure you keep a little can of oil by there. There's no such thing as using too much oil as you're cutting through with a good drill bit. Okay, so we've got all the pieces here. As you can see, there's not a whole lot that this is going to take to mount this. This is kind of the moment of truth if all my measurements are correct. I'm using these no slip pads here for this one so we can wedge it in there nice and tight. I'm offsetting them from the edge a little bit so we'll get a nice reveal when we stand this up. So you can see this whole thing is all welded together. Here's all the pieces we should need. So this piece is going to go against the ceiling. I have this brass washer to go in there. And I actually have a nylon washer as well, but I may just use that brass washer. You can see that's just going to spin really easily. And this is, the screwdriver is going to go in here to spin this and twist that to tighten it up. So now that I've got this, I'm going to thread this into the top here. All the way down. So here is the moment of truth. Again, you can see we've got the DeWalt laser in there. That DeWalt self-leveling laser is one of my favorite tools. Just set it on the ground. So you can see it'll need to come over a little bit, but that's what the point of this is. We've got another one of this anti-skid pads on here. I've cut a 1/4 inch reveal to get a nice little reveal around the edge. I decided I am going to use the nylon and the brass washer. The nylon's nice because it's very, very slippery. So as I turn the screw, it'll slip very easily. The brass is really nice because if something is going to give, the brass will give first. It's a softer metal than the steel. So brass washers are nice for wear washers. This isn't going to wear, but it's just nice to have in there. So I'm going to balance both those on top there. Bring this guy in here. Ooh. It's close. It looks like it's going to make it here. Okay. So now I put it in there. Great. Okay. So now all I have to do is just thread this guy up here. Looks like my measurements did work, which is good. People might question my abilities as an architect if I couldn't measure things correctly. So that's good. Looks like it's kind of level or fairly level, yeah. This up here, I'm not going to get this too tight. I certainly don't want to punch a hole in the drywall, but I do want it to be nice and snug. So as we put books in here, it's not going to fall down. You've seen the little brackets that IKEA sells to keep their things from falling down. I think this is a much more elegant solution, hopefully, to that. So, check here for level. Am I on the laser on the left-hand side there? Yes, okay. So it looks like I need to come over just a little tiny bit. Okay. There we go, looks good. So I'm gonna put my screwdriver in here. Give it a couple cranks. It's getting quite snug already. So, there we go. Steel bookshelf. So we'll populate this with books so you can see what it's going to look like in daily use.